Yeehaw!
Hi, this is Ron Jackson, and this is the Break It Down Show.
Fuck yeah, I love it. Ron wrote an incredible book. Shit, I don't have it. Ron, hold your book up for us. There you go. There it is, right there. Here's the link for it on the page. Let me just put this in the screen. It's called The Ride. It's one of the. You know what? It's a great book. I'm going to have someone who's never read the book but knows the story as a legend. My buddy Cody Wood, who's joining us today as a co-host. Cody, tell us what the rodeo world thinks of The Ride, the story, and then we'll come back to Ron.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of, for sure, the greatest stories inside our sport and rodeo history and bull riding history specifically. When you hear the name Freckles and Freckles Brown and Tornado, it is absolutely rodeo lore, and that story has carried for generations now. And a lot of our success as a sport and as an industry can be traced right back to that moment when Freckles Brown rode Tornado on a massive scale and allowed the sport to get to a whole nother level at that moment.
Yeah. Ron, when you hear that and you know your background in terms of finding this story, what do you have to say about that?
Well, it gives me chills because that's kind of what I had when I first heard the story. And I heard it about 17 years ago. I was a news reporter in the Oklahoman newspaper in Oklahoma City, and a friend of mine, colleague of mine who covered rodeo, had told me the story. He asked me if I'd ever heard about Freckles, and I hadn't. And even though I was a sports writer for 11 years, I didn't cover a lot of rodeo. I'd ridden some bulls, on a lark, but I'd never covered rodeo, and I didn't know who Freckles was. And he told me the story. This 46-year-old beloved former world champion who draws this bull that hadn't been ridden in like 7 years. The legend was there was 220 cowboys that had been tossed or just turned the bull out, didn't even ride him out of fear. That was the whole aura that surrounded Tornado at the 1967 National Finals Rodeo in Oklahoma City. And Freckles, of all people, draws him in the first round. And people were so literally afraid that this bull was going to turn on him and kill him. I mean, there was that kind of fear in the arena. And anyway, as the legend goes, the ride happens. And as Cody said, it really put rodeo on the map. I mean, he was on national radio shows. The story was on national radio shows. The story went viral for the time. And it really and people in rodeo, the people who put on the events and organized them, would freely admit that moment in time changed everything. And I haven't met anybody who has heard Freckles' story who hasn't been moved by it. And what I will say is as iconic a moment as this is in rodeo history, I think people in general will be gravitated to this story because it's a great story. And what the treasure that I found was that the man behind this moment was such a beautiful human being and lived such an amazing life. His life was improbable. How he ended up where he did was improbable. And that, to me, is the real heartbeat of this story.
Yeah, the book is great. I read it, and the American story that's in it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
This guy is a farmhand. Yes, he is great at riding bronco busting, and yes, he rides bulls. Mm-hmm. But it's a Steinbeckian story. There's just Steinbeck all through this. Is this guy's riding the rails and trying to figure out how to do things. And gosh, tell that story real quick, Ron. Like how hard this guy's life was, and just about how his brother disappeared one day. As they were on the road and just.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was very blessed because I got access to thanks to Wiley Harrison, Freckles' son-in-law, who's still alive, thankfully. Him and his family gave me access to their private papers and all that, and I was able to interview his inner circle about Freckles. But the story was kind of a classic. You said it, kind of American story back then during the Depression. He's a teenager in the Depression, and everybody's hurting. And him and his brother set out for they decide they're going to go to Washington and pick apples in a harvest and make some money. So they ride the rails. They were out in Tucson at the time. That's where they were living. They ride the rails. They go up to Washington, and en route, they're hopping from train to train. And back then, that not only was riding the rails dangerous, but you had like railroad bulls that would come and beat you, and if you tried to get on their trains. So they had this whole thing going on, and they were in this town. They were hitchhiking. And they thought the brother thought it would be better if Freckles was seen first because he was younger. He thought that maybe people would be more apt to pick up a lone kid, and then he would go down the road a little bit, and and then he would say, "Hey, that's my brother," and can he ever ride too? And then they pick him up and they get on down the road. So sure enough, two ladies come by in a car, and the older ladies, and nice car, and they pick him up and they're just talking away and stuff. And as they're driving down the road, they're getting ready to pass his brother, Bryson. And Freckles is, he's a shy teenager. These women are talking. He's trying to get their attention. Next thing you know, he just drives by, and he's looking at his brother as he's driving by. And he didn't see his brother for like 2.5 years after that. They were supposed to meet in a town further up in Oregon. Freckles waited there for several days, and he was going door to door trying to work for food and cut wood, do whatever he could. Couldn't find anything. He was, he'd lost everything, had nothing, and was sleeping on park benches with newspapers as a blanket. And he looked in his bag, and he realized he had he reminded himself that he had a connection in Cody, Wyoming, with a man named Snyder, a rancher. And so he hopped the rails and went to Cody, showed up full of, tattered clothes and everything and soot, and went to the ranch. And that rancher remembered him from Arizona and hired him. It was a place called Sunlight Basin. It's about 50 miles north of Cody, Wyoming. It's this pristine, beautiful place I visited. And anyway, long story short, he got separated from his brother for 2.5 years, but that ranch turned out to be his salvation.
Does that still happen today, Cody? Like a kid, I'll say hitchhiking, whatever, kind of wandering around, and he gets picked up by the Sunlight Valley Ranch and becomes something. Is that still a possible storyline for rodeo?
Oh, absolutely is. I mean, maybe not in those same context, and some of those challenges during the Depression and stuff. But it's so funny that it's in Cody, Wyoming, and where Freckles found his salvation in a sense, because still to this day, Cody, Wyoming, the Cody Night Rodeo, they have a legit rodeo every single night of the summer. And so you'll have a lot of these young, teenage kids right out of high school, maybe early college years, and they'll spend their entire summer there in Cody, Wyoming, working for that rodeo and learning the tricks of the trade. And you can trace back some of the greatest rodeo athletes that are there right now, whether they're a bullfighter, and Dusty Tuckness is for sure the one that stands out, but an announcer that I can think of, and just a number of rodeo athletes that have done that same thing through Cody. And when you look at the rodeo world in general, there's a lot of guys and gals that do come from impoverished areas, to be honest, and they have an opportunity, they get some of the equipment, they, start to learn the tricks of the trade. And a lot of people will pull themselves out of a very tough financial situation by utilizing their athletic ability in the rodeo arena. And that's always a great story to find.
Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I love that determination, and that's really what it takes to make it. I'm sure today, I mean, just that grit and determination, and Freckles had that in spades. And I think one of the things that people have told me repeatedly, people that knew him, was that no matter what he had faced, no matter if he had broke his back or neck, or was dealing with the Depression, wherever, he always had this optimism and determination to press through. And he was I mean, his closest friends called him a beautiful person. And it's almost like it's not real. But I'm telling you, I interviewed 36 at least people that knew him in life, and nobody had anything even remotely negative to say about him. or his attitude. He was just universally beloved. And I think that as a human being is almost hard to believe. But that's the story I came up with him. So
give us an idea, Cody, where someone like Freckles is, and we'll talk. I can't wait till you guys understand just who Freckles was. But give us an idea of like the legend status. Is there a proxy somewhere across the the American cultural landscape? I mean, is he Paul Bunyan? Like, what kind of character does he cut still to this day? He rode this bull in 1967, everybody, and he passed away, gosh, in the 80s, right? So
87, yeah. Cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite questions in life, in sports specifically, is, who's your Mount Rushmore, right? Who's the Mount Rushmore of basketball, of quarterbacks, whatever the question may be. When you talk about the Mount Rushmore of bull riding, and I absolutely love history in general, let alone you get into bull riding history, and I will talk your ear off. But when you talk about bull riding history as a whole, Freckles Brown, could be traced back to, let's say, Thomas Jefferson, right? I mean, you're going to have your Jim Shoulders that I might look at as a George Washington, but Freckles Brown would be right there on Mount Rushmore, in Thomas Jefferson's place. And what he had done in that moment, like I said, even more so than Jim Shoulders, who won more world titles. But, like I was kind of saying offline, even to this day, here at 2025 and all this time ago, I guarantee you go to a couple of rodeos, you're guaranteed to pass a little cattle dog named Freckles, because of what he means to our sports and bull riding specifically too. When you think of just his story and overcoming the fire breathing dragon that never been rode, those sorts of things drive young bull riders to this day, right? So you have, your Freckles Browns and Tornadoes, you've got your JB Moonies and Bushwhacker, in a more modern day era. But that is the moment that these young bull riders, thrive and just absolutely ride bulls for, to be that Freckles Brown that rode the unrideable and to know that deep down there's no bull on the planet that can throw them off. And those are the stories that they can resonate with. And I'm so excited to read your book, Ron, because, we know the story. We've seen the video, the black and white video of Tornado being right there in the gate, and just so awesome of a bull ride. But to learn that, like, just when you were talking about, his upbringing and going to Washington, like, I was hanging on every word that you said, just because it's, those are the details that are, that we'd love to hear and learn from. So I cannot wait to get into it.
Before we get too further into, wait, let me add one more thing before we get too further into Freckles, but keep your thought, Ron, please.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about Tornado and, the level of respect he got, and what does it mean to ride an unrideable bull? I mean, does that even happen anymore? Give us an idea in your world, Cody, what a Tornado is.
Yeah. Oh man. Now we're really getting into it, because when you talk about the animal athletes of it, this is, I mean, it's such an amazing part of our sport. And one of the things that we, just really love about just rodeo in general, right? The love of these animals and the athletic ability and getting to know their personalities behind the scenes. And so, today, right now, the bull business is massive. When you talk about the bloodlines and some of the different things that have come over the last few decades, equivalency to, horse racing and that sort of thing. But when you talk about Tornado and what it meant to go those 220 outs with not having a qualified ride, and what he is on that Mount Rushmore, he is absolutely on the very top of that. When you trace back the bulls and where they came from, and you go from, Tornado to Oscar to Red Rock to Bodacious to Bushwhacker to Manhater today. Those are bulls that are considered to be unrideable. Now, each one of them, had their moment and had their time, which is exactly why we love sports, right? Where they did get rode, but those animal athletes is everything in rodeo, and it's what makes us different, makes us special, and the care and the camaraderie that you have with an animal is super special and different versus other sports. And so when you talk about a Tornado, that resonates big time. And I'm coming off of, the ABBI World Finals, where all it is about the bucking bulls and their bloodlines and everything else. And Tornado's at the very top of that list.
Yeah,
And you were going to say something when I cut you off. So sorry, man. Go
well,
ahead.
no, that's okay. I did want to kind of jump in here on something Cody's saying. As you know, Pete, I love the evolution of sports in general. I mean, I love the comparisons of Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds and so forth, and because every sport evolves. And what I like to do is take those things in those periods. It's hard to compare what Babe Ruth would have been like, for instance, had he had all the nutrition and the workout and all that kind of stuff that they have today. I mean, the athletes today are just incredible. And Cody knows this, so I'm not telling him anything he doesn't know. But when I started looking at some of the bulls that were out there now, my jaw just dropped because genetically, athletically, they are jumping out of the gym. I mean, it's amazing to see the athleticism. And but as Cody said, for that era, for that time, tornado was that for that era. And like any sport, there's been this evolution, and it just keeps getting more and more exciting. And they are athletes, and within the rodeo community, this is something I knew beforehand, but it was emphasized to me throughout my interviews. Rodeo folks love the animals. Rodeo folks take care of the animals. I mean, they're beloved. The animals are they're like the athletes. I mean, so anyway, that's all I had to say on that. But I wanted to put something into perspective. We're talking about Freckles being on that Mount Rushmore of bull riders, and again, this is something Cody will know. I'm not telling him anything, but to put it into context, Freckles started rodeoing. He started riding bulls at the age of 16 in Wilcox, Arizona, in 1937. He rodeoed until he retired in 1974. When he rode Tornado in 67 at the age of 46, he was about a month shy of being 47. That's already a biblical age for a bull rider. And Freckles was still doing it at the highest level. And he still rodeoed till 1974. And Cody, I would love to know, because you know this deep in your heart, what is that accomplishment?
Oh man, I was hoping and waiting for that part of the conversation to come up, because I mean, like, you get over the age of 40, here we are in 2025, we got all these different supplements and all the different things to help you feel youthful and all those aspects, let alone to be 46 years old and climbing down on the back of a 1,800-pound bucking athlete, and then having to track them and what that takes from an athletic standpoint at that age is incredible, let alone the ability to do it over and over and over again, and so to your point, actually, I grew up in a bull riding family. My father actually rode bulls into his 50s, which is extremely rare, and
wow.
I love this piece of the story because wow. It's one thing you go out there at 33 years old and you get slammed, and you start questioning, should I be doing this? Can my body take this? Let alone at 46, right? And so it's not like he just got on Tornado, that day. He probably had gotten on 150 bulls at that point in time in that year of 1967, so wow. That many times he'd gotten down on the back of a bull and probably took some serious shots and had to overcome that adversity. And then to your point, to keep riding bulls after that, there's a really his traveling partner, and I'm really curious to see this in the story if it was there, but Ronnie Rosin, did that name come up at all?
Ronnie Rosin came up.
Yeah. And so there's a tribute to Ronnie Rosin and a buckle that you can win in this particular association that has to do in a senior association. And it's based off of Ronnie and Freckles and some of these other guys from that generation that they just loved to rodeo so much that they would never give it up, right? They rode bulls, rode bucking horses, roped, steer wrestled well into their 50s and into their 60s in some cases. And you got to appreciate that, to where you love something so much that you're willing to take the bumps and the bruises and not let it go.
Freckles used to joke that he was a walking hardware store, and it really wasn't a joke because he kind of was. He had metal all throughout him and stuff, but this guy had, and it's in the book, it's kind of littered throughout it, but just all the broken ankles and torn, ligaments and broken neck. And I mean, just broken ribs, everything that you can imagine. It was like Evel Knievel in rodeo. And yet he never paused. He kept coming back. He kept having a positive outlook on things. And I'm blown away by his determination. I got a chance a couple times to spend some time down at his ranch in Soper, Oklahoma, this little wide spot in the road down in southeast Oklahoma. And I got to walk the grounds and everything with Wiley, his son-in-law. And he used to tell me that Freckles was always in motion. If he would go through, he'd be walking into his house, and there's like a little metal overhang thing, and he would jump up and do pull-ups, and he would just, instead of like taking the truck out to the field if he didn't need it, he would run out there. He was just always in motion. But this is the part that I love. This is a personal thing. So he took me out to the barn, and he pointed down to this anvil, and a little small anvil. I don't know. I can't remember. Probably 100, 150 pounds, something like that, probably. And he said, "See that anvil there? That anvil is very special to me." And I said, "Well, why is that, Wiley?" And he said, "Freckles used to come out here sometimes." And he said, "I wouldn't tell you this if I didn't see it with my own eyes, but he'd pick it up by the horn and he would curl it." And I mean, Freckles is 5'0", but he was all that. And of course I tried it and I couldn't even budget, but this guy he had trained himself for holding onto the rope and riding bulls and horses and all that. I mean, he was diligent, always in motion.
Yeah, and we talk about, the animal athletes and whatnot, and obviously they're extreme athletes. I mean, at the highest level, man, when you talk about, the ability to ride a bucking bull and the lean muscle mass and in the fast twitch motions that you need to have, the flexibility, all these little variables, they're extreme athletes. They might not bounce off a page like a NFL wide receiver, right? Fast. Mm-hmm. High, that sort of thing, but from the ability to have pound for pound strength is incredible. And in any aspect of rodeo, there are some hidden athletes in there that are athletic, like I said, at the highest level. And that, what a cool story too. Like you're saying, to obviously limited in their equipment and that sort of thing, to be utilizing animals and holes in a barn and whatever else. I mean, but yeah, that does not surprise me to hear that about Freckles. One, just to be that athletic of a bull rider, but then two, to have the longevity to ride as long as he did. I would imagine that he was probably the cream of the crop athletic wise in the 60s.
Yeah. He was kind of past his prime and still rising. It's like he should have been past his prime. And when other guys had, that were amazingly accomplished, like Shoulders, this Babe Ruth of rodeo. When he was kind of fading out, Freckles was still going. It seemed like he defied logic in that way for whatever reason.
Yeah, and in all sorts of sports these days, we, obviously we put that at a pinnacle, right? Whether it's the Tom Brady's or the Cal Ripkins or, whatever the case may be. Right now with inside rodeo and bull riding, there's a couple that have gone over 40, and that in itself is a testament. Like I said, that was an aspect of the story that I absolutely love, that I think gets overlooked, and a lot of people, even to this day, some of the younger rodeo athletes don't realize the story that you're really breaking down and how he got there and the beginning and the after. So which again is why I'm so excited to, read the book and learn some of those aspects of this, one of the greatest rodeo stories of all time.
Yeah. Appreciate that. I went, as I do with my books, I put every ounce of energy I can into it. And one of the things I love to do is I try to walk in the footsteps of the people that I'm writing about. So, I went in Wyoming, where Freckles grew up on his farm. I went down to Tucson, where his family lived, where they had moved. And I went to all these different places, throughout Texas and his ranch. And Sunlight Basin. I walked through Sunlight Basin where he found his salvation, and so I mean it was a pretty cool journey to just walk in his footsteps, and then I've done books where I've did books on the Alamo and stuff like that, where I'm dealing with people that are gone for hundreds of years, and yet this was a joy because I was able to actually interview people that knew him, that rode with him, that competed against him, that was like Freckles' family, and what a treasure that was to be able to. All those people, I consider them all co-authors because they all helped bring this man back to life as much as we could, his story. So very, very grateful for all of that journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, so, and for them to be able to tell it, right? I mean, because to your point, I mean, this is a story that could be a motion picture and be a blockbuster, I mean, because it's not just about rodeo. It is, right. It is about the American spirit and being, men's achievement, if you will, and overcoming all the adversity like we talked about. But, but just even like where you're saying and where you went and tracked down some of his footsteps, and where those footsteps have led today, right? Like we've talked about the bull riders and the bulls themselves and the animal athletes. Where my mind really goes to too is also like where it happened, right? Oklahoma City at the National Finals Rodeo. And here we are, sure enough, 1 month away, almost to the date of, the Wrangler National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas kicking off, which is now 10 days of just a multi-million-dollar event that is massive. I don't think the general public realizes how big of a sporting event the National Finals Rodeo is. In Vegas in itself, it's the number 2 economic driver out of all the shows that go into Las Vegas. It's number 2, just behind the CES show that happens in January. And so my point in saying all that is, that moment, not only did it put the bull on the map, it put the bull rider on the map, it put the sport and the National Finals Rodeo on a national stage. And what that has done and trickled down from that and moved into the 70s and into the 80s and where it all went, it all started there. Like we had some big moments at Madison Square Garden with Jim Shoulders and some of those different things, but you could pinpoint the Freckles Brown and Tornado ride as the turning point of what put us on the mainstream and allowed us to get to this multi-million-dollar industry now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Why does some cowpoke who never was quite the best but was always competitive, why did that break the thing open? What changed?
Well, I think for sure it was Tornado having, like I said, 220 outs and whatnot, and then to conquer the beast in a sense, that is a true David and Goliath story, right? That's David and Goliath playing out in real time on your TV screen in some cases, or, just in general. And so that in itself was really what made it too, right? And then when you take in all the nuances of Freckles Brown and his history and his life and his adversity and his age and all that, but you can't have Freckles Brown without Tornado, and you can't have Tornado without Freckles Brown at this point. And so to have the two come together on the biggest stage too, that was the other thing. If it happened just in, Redmond, Oregon or whatnot, it might not have been the same story that it is now, and so when you go back and you look at Lane Frost and some of the stories that, came after that and where this evolved into, some of those biggest stories happened on that same stage at the National Finals Rodeo when, Tough Hedeman rode his bull for 16 seconds because he was riding for Lane, right? That happened at the NFR, and so just like in sports, just like in the World Series that just happened, those are the moments that we crave in sports, right? When are they going to be able to get it done at the highest level when all the chips are on the line, when all the pressure, all the eyes, and that's what Freckles Brown was able to accomplish there with Tornado.
Yeah, as Cody said, it was a true David and Goliath story, and the story was so riveting. I interviewed Red Stiegel, who ended up writing the ballad of Freckles Brown, basically, and he bumped into him at a hotel They were in this room. He goes in, he sees this little guy in a chair, and everybody in the room is just watching this TV, and it's a constant loop of the video that Cody is. It's a blurry black and white video of Freckles riding Tornado, and they keep looping it. And of course, all the attention is on Freckles, and Freckles was a pretty shy, pretty humble guy, very friendly, but there's all this attention, which he always tried to deflect. And so Red sat down and asked him to tell him the story of that ride, and Freckles did, and they became lifelong friends at that moment. And on a plane back to Tennessee, Red said he wrote the lyrics to that song, and which further immortalized it to the point where Clem McSpadden, who ran the finals, and it was a dear friend of Freckles. In fact, they were best friends. They did a recreation.
All right, there we go.
I'm sorry.
Technical dip. That's all right.
They did a recreation of that at the National Finals. So Red would come out and play the song, and they'd have a bull out in the spotlight. And they did that for several years afterward. So it just kind of further cemented the legend of Freckles and Tornado, because you don't have the one without the other. It's kind of like Ali Frazier. You needed them both.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love that, and I absolutely love the song too. I'm old school at heart. There might not be a lot of people, modern day bull riders, that have heard it, and they should. But to your point, it's amazing what a great song like that can do. And then with Clem and his influence at the NFR and how to highlight that. I mean, just what a cool piece of history to highlight.
I wanted to share, if I could, Pete, I wanted to share something just to kind of give a piece of who Freckles really was in his heart. I had the privilege of going down to Houston, and I interviewed Murtis Deitman, who's considered the Jackie Robinson of rodeo. And when I talked to him about Freckles, he kind of got choked up, because he said, Freckles was one of those guys that just saw the man and didn't see the color of the skin, and told him from the start that anything you need, I'll help. And Freckles was willing to help anybody if he could give him 2 cents here, 2 cents there, help them however. But they would go on the road, and back then a lot of these guys would travel around like gypsies from town to town, rodeo to rodeo, and they would pile into a hotel room or whatever. Well, back in the day, at that time in the South, Freckles wasn't even allowed to go into these hotels because he was black. And the cowboys, not just Freckles, but the other cowboys, would leave a window open, give him a key to the room. They would do those types of things for him. And Freckles is right in the center of all that. And I think that's important to share with people, because, we're talking like the 60s, early 60s and stuff. And that's who he was. And I think that's important to share.
Yeah, it's a huge piece of the story. Like I said, that's why I kind of lit up when you talked about Murtis Deitman and what he means to our sport, and to the bull riding world as a whole. And so that's an amazing piece. So that's in the book, a lot of that story. Oh man,
there's a lot of stuff in it.
Yep. Yeah, I cannot wait to dig into it. I'll be getting mine on Amazon as soon as we're done here. And yeah, that's phenomenal. What a cool piece of the story that people need to hear.
Yeah, I do share
Speaking of going to Amazon, hold that book up, Ron. Let's sell some copies right now. Look, here's the ride right here, everybody. I've read this thing. I love it. Cody's going to love it. Look at that smile on his face.
Right.
Here's what I always say to everybody. You buy 2. That's what you do. And you give one to a buddy, and your buddy read this thing. And if you had all like sports, if you had all like American mid-century history, you're going to love the images. Ron writes a beautiful book anyhow, and the details that he grabs are just incredible. And behind Ron are a bunch of other incredible books. He has one of the best, most important books about the Alamo. And above his right shoulder there, he's got one about the barge fight from Benicia that we're trying to make a movie out of. So Ron's books, listen, just start with one of them and just keep reading all of them. definitely go get the ride. It is awesome. And just look, if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. Right there you go, right there. I'll guarantee Ron's book. Yeah.
I will say this. I will say this. If somebody wants an autographed copy and they want to order one, they can get a hold of me directly it's alamo.ron@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to sign any books for people and all that. So anyway.
Yeah, I'll put that in here in the links for everybody. Most important, just make sure you guys get these books. Cody, I wanted to ask you, so one of the things that Freckles was known for, and this is all in the book, is that he would work the rodeo, and also he was prolific. Like if there was the word ROD, he was going to be there. If it was even something else, like he was rodeo. And one of the reasons why he got to that championship level is he just outworked everybody. But also at the event, he's like, let me shoe these horses, let me do this. And he just did all kinds of shit. It's amazing the amount of work. Does that exist anymore? Or these guys, there's no knocking anybody modern, but are they more athletes? Because he's a ranch hand doing ranch things and rodeoing. I mean, this guy was made out of rodeo.
Yeah, you're right. And to answer your questions, a little bit of both, right? So, just coming off the PBR Teams Championship in Las Vegas, these bull riders have really become specimens, right? They're true athletes. Their agendas, their decorum is very structured. However, you still have, and even with inside the top 40 in the world, if you will, some true to the bone, flat out cowboys, right? That will pick up a rope, go shag some bulls out in the pasture, that will shoe a horse that afternoon, that will work every aspect of the rodeo from beginning to end and fight bulls and then ride a bull. Like that is still a really cool key piece of our sport right now that you has just been passed down from generation to generation. It's one of those things that either it's in your blood and you're made to be a cowboy, or the other piece of the puzzle that I absolutely love is somebody that might be from, the Bronx of New York, and they saw 8 seconds or whatever the case may be, and they made a mental note that that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be a bull rider. I'm supposed to be a cowboy. And next thing you know, you've got these guys that might not have had that background, but they are all in and they are all cowboy through, top to bottom. And so you get a little bit of both in those sense. The sport has definitely evolved and is definitely mainstream. It's definitely, these bull riders have a very tight window to their success, and they have to be professional, no doubt. But there are darn sure some cowboys still on this planet.
Yeah.
I'll share a little story with you guys. So first of all, I got to interview Marvin Paul Shoulders, Jim Shoulders' son, who wasn't a bad bull rider himself, but I got to talk to him, and that was a real treat. Talked about his father and stuff. There was a story about Shoulders the first time he met Freckles, and he talked about how he woke up one morning. He was at this little rodeo, I think it was in Oklahoma somewhere, and he hears this pounding of the shoes. He sees this little guy out there putting shoes on a horse and, and going at it. And this is like, he's like trying to open his eyes. So he gets in his car and he goes to breakfast, and he comes back, and that little guy's still going. He's still working away and stuff. So anyway, he gets ready for the rodeo, and sure enough, this little guy's out there, and he's in every event, and he's winning stuff. And so later that night, they had a dance for all the folks at the rodeo. And he says, there's that little guy again out on the dance floor, dancing until like 2 a.m. And he said, that was the first time I saw Freckles. And that's when I knew he was something special, because he just had this endless energy. So I thought that was cool, because they became very good friends. So, in fact, Shoulders was the first one to come out on the arena floor when after the ride. Jim was the first one to greet him.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Can we try to blow Cody's mind a little bit? Will you talk about Freckles' experience in World War II?
Yeah, I mean, where to start? They identified him right away. In the early days, this is a guy that could work with animals, and they were still using pack mules and everything up in the mountains around China and stuff like that. So folks that were talented in that way were coveted, and Freckles was one of those. But somewhere along the line, somebody identified him as trustworthy enough, daring enough, probably from his rodeo stuff, that he would. They asked him if he'd be part of the OSS. It was kind of a forerunner to the CIA, and what they did is they made him a paratrooper. So he's jumping out of planes, and he said he'd much rather jump out of a plane than land in a plane. He'd never been on a plane, but this is how fearless this guy was. And no surprise, right? He's riding 1,800-pound bulls. But right before the war ended, and this is true, they were getting ready to go in to invade Japan. And he was gonna drop in with Chinese paratroopers that they had trained behind the enemy lines. Like, that was his fate when the war finally ended. And that's just one small piece of everybody's story for World War II, or many soldiers. But the other funny thing about him is that when he was stationed, like at Fort Sill, he would leave at night and he would go enter these rodeos, and he would borrow the horses and stuff from the army to go compete. And so there was a whole thing. There's many stories in there about that. So, but he never forgot his love of rodeo throughout that whole thing. And when he came out, like a lot of men came out of World War II, their lives were changed, their attitudes were changed, perspectives changed, and they dug in and made a life. And he dug in right away, married his love, Edith, built up a ranch with his own two hands, and rodeoed till he couldn't rodeo anymore. That was his dream.
Man,
How about that?
What a life, right?
Yeah.
What a life, and I did not know that. I did not know that he was in the war, and let alone to be a paratrooper. Like, how proud, it just makes me proud, honestly, as a cowboy and as a rodeo person.
Yeah, it hits her.
And so that is a piece of the story that I'm so excited to dig into, and like I said, and for you to share. And man, you look at these people's lives, that they're just built different, right? Not every man is created equal, and you have a life like that where you're riding the rails to Washington, sleeping on a bench, to next thing you're a paratrooper in World War II, and then next thing you're creating a life of a legacy, and becoming a world champion and having that moment. I mean, what a cool individual.
I always wondered, I'd heard this a long time ago when I was a sports writer, and you try to put things into perspective, but it came from a father of a basketball player, and they used to talk about the pressure of shooting a free throw, and that sort of thing. And he told his son, he said, pressure is not shooting a free throw with a game on the line. Pressure is when you just lost your job and you got 3 kids at home that you got to feed. And I kind of, when I look at folks like Freckles, who went through the Depression and a world war and all these things, kind of makes me wonder sometimes, like, were they able to maybe put a little more perspective on the pressure? Not that it's not there, not that they're not dealing with it. Clearly they are, but maybe they're equipped a little more than the rest of us to handle that. That's just the thought,
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I think you can see that in life in itself right now, right? Because somebody's their hard is different than another person's, I mean, until you experience something and you go through it, in your mindset, your experience, whatever you've gone through, that was the hardest moment for you. And boy, is it very different from one person to the next.
Absolutely.
And you, like you said, you go through the Depression, and you're in world, not only just to be in a war, but to be in World War II, to be in the rising sun side, if he was over in the East rather than, some of the other areas that might not have been, is crazy and dangerous. And I'm sure he saw things that no man would want to see. And so who knows, what that established in him to allow him to be so successful in the rodeo arena.
Yeah, that resolve. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're talking about, jumping out of an airplane, on the banks that, the border of China and wherever else you might be during World War II, climbing down on the back of an 1,800-pound bucking bull might not be as dangerous, or might not be as scary.
Yeah.
to go do a spy mission.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there was no. I want to jump in the main screen here. When you get thrown out of the back of an airplane to ride a horse in China, there ain't no help coming. If you don't figure it out, you're gonna die. And that's like, you talk about the unknown. Like, there's no jacket warm enough. There's no food good enough. You're on the edge of absolute survival. And to Freckles, he's like, I like it out here.
Just in his element for sure. No, I'm so happy. Like, I can't wait. I did not know that. I had no clue about that piece of the story.
I love that. I love that we got to throw that at you.
Yeah,
Ron.
Yeah, no, that's why I always say the heartbeat of the story is really the life story behind the moment that led up to this iconic moment, which has its own heartbeat. But it's a beautiful story. I hope everybody gets a chance to read it and enjoy it. So I enjoyed putting it together. I can tell you that it was one of the great privileges of my life to be able to research and tell this story. So.
Yeah, well, I can tell you from speaking on, I mean, I know on behalf of the millions of cowboys that are, rodeo cowboys specifically, that are on this planet right now and getting ready to go to the NFR and whatever else, we are super appreciative for you to tell the story, because there are so many awesome people and animals that they come from this world, and that story of Freckles Brown and Tornado, it doesn't get much better than that. And so thank you so much for taking the time to do it right too, and to do it justice by taking the effort and to going and walking in his footsteps. And I just, really looking forward to getting it, at my front door and start digging in and reading.
Appreciate it.
I want to ask you, Cody, because when we first met, you were doing a thing like you too can rodeo and you can ride a bull and everything. What is the difference between, like, my brother and I used to play riding bulls. We'd buck each other around and, like, open and shoot. And we'd have a good time. But it was all play and pretend. And our feet were basically on the ground the entire time. What is the difference between someone who's like, I think I might try me some rodeo, and then getting on a Hall of Fame special burial, like, kind of bull that Tornado was? What's the gap there? Like,
it might be the biggest gap in all of sports, to be honest. So, like, and a lot of people obviously might attest it to like a bucking machine, a mechanical bull, that's their experience, which is awesome, right? I hope many people as possible ride a mechanical bull, just to experience a little bit, but a real bucking bull and the fact that they're moving forward and they're kicking and they're spinning and the sheer athleticism of those bulls is so incredible. And when you look at where the bull power in the world has gone, there's always, Tornado was one of a kind back in the 60s, and he was as rank and as athletic as they came. But now there's, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bulls that are just so incredibly good that it's made it a little bit of a challenge. You're seeing these bull riders, their riding percentages is much lower than it's ever been because the bulls are at a whole nother level. But ultimately, a great testament to what you're referring to. And, say what you want about him. I'll be a fan of his for the rest of my life because, Chad Ochocinco, Chad Johnson, got on a bucking bull a few years back, right? It might've been 10 years at this point, but not only did he get on a bull, he got on an actual bucking bull, like a PBR bucking bull. And, he might be one of the most athletic people there was, especially at that time, being an NFL wide receiver. But, he maybe lasted 1.5 seconds, right? Because, that athleticism doesn't carry over to what it takes and the time and the energy and the effort. Like, it's not something that you can just pick up a ball and run and be athletic. You have to learn this sport, learn this trade, all the little nuances it takes just to get to an 8-second whistle is phenomenal and really overwhelming when you're talking about starting the sport. But there's very few sports that are, that compare in certain aspects. And, the sport of bull riding and rodeo as a whole is growing by leaps and bounds, and the ability not just to become a world champion and to make, $1 million, $2 million a year, but the ability to be the top 100 in the world and to make a living at it. And the sponsorship dollars that are coming has been, at the highest level it's ever been over the last couple of years. Tickets have never been selling faster, and it's a good time to be a part of rodeo and bull riding.
Love it. Ron, when I think about the difference, Cody just said may not be a bigger difference out there. It's like putting on skates and going into an NHL game, or people like humans can't catch major league pitching. Like you sat there with your adorable little glove. They're like, yeah, good luck, right? I mean, what comes to mind for you? What's the gap between someone like Freckles and like you and I going, let's give it a try?
I mean, Grand Canyon. I in my prime, and I'm almost embarrassed to even say this, but in my prime as an athlete, I was pretty good. I got on a couple bulls. They were just, they were nothing compared to what's on a pro circuit. But I got on a 1,700-pound bull, and I just lowering on that bull and feeling that energy, just that right between my legs was just amazing. And the other thing too about it, this isn't just training. You're talking about the not just the bumps and bruises of learning the profession, but you're learning what you may get broken bones. There's it's a danger factor. There's all those other elements, and as Cody has emphasized, these are prime athletes, and they just, like I said, my jaw just drops watching these bulls jump today. I'm amazed by them. I'm amazed by cowboys that are riding them. It just keeps getting better and better and better.
I had some
Grand
friends
Canyon.
that
Grand Canyon
they had some longhorns, and you'd feed them, and you'd have like a cane, and they had all come up because you had the bucket for feeding them, and you had the cane to kind of whap in case it got crazy. And they didn't want to like run into the cane; that was bad for them. But when that bull showed up, and I'm not in any way a cowboy at all, right? I was like, oh, there's a new boss in town. This thing, if it wants to push me, if it wants to kill me, this cane ain't gonna do shit. It was terrifying. And then it like got excited because it saw the thing like you cannot run. And every instinct in your body when you're on the ground and a bull is coming towards you at a pretty jaunty pace is to get the fuck out of there, because this thing is, you can't understand how big and strong these things are. Yeah. And so, like you said, for Chad Ochocinco to hop on the back of a bull, yeah, like that alone is terrible. I got on a camel one time, and I'm like, I'm 10 feet up in the air and totally no control, and it was terrifying. And you're going in the wrong direction to keep your weight, and that's a camel that's supposed to give tourist rides, and it was fun, but also like it is like, oh, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. It was crazy. So I'm glad that you painted that for us, Cody, because yeah, just seeing a bull when there's nothing between you and it. Oh man,
this is a terrible analogy. So I don't even want to make an analogy, but being a big baseball fan and having played baseball, I always tell people, when you look at all the different positions, to me, catching is always the toughest position, because you got to embrace that. You got to want to take the hits. You've got to want to block the ball. You got to put your body out there in every way. Take the foul tips off the wrist and still keep going. The catchers are just cut a little different. Bull riding, that's another level completely. And I don't even think I could come up with an analogy that could compare that. Am I wrong, Cody?
Yeah, no. So to your point, this aspect of the sport is one that makes it so amazing, but it's also can be the lowest of the low, right? Because you can die. This is not. Yeah. Is no joke, that things, when you're talking about an analogy or a comparison, I think a car crash is really the only comparison, right?
Yeah.
When it goes bad, when it goes bad, it goes bad really fast. And it's one of those things, and I'm an announcer, that is one of the hardest aspects of announcing, right? Because if somebody gets hurt fairly seriously, obviously do everything possible, make sure that they're getting the care that they deserve, but then the show goes on, right? Like when Cam Scattaboo, hurt his ankle the other day and it was fairly gruesome, they had to get up to the line and call the next play. So to have to get the crowd back up, you go down, you have to go back up, but that's also why people want to watch. It's like NASCAR, and they're looking for that wreck, and obviously you pray that it never happens, but unfortunately in bull riding, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how bad. And so going back to taking care of yourself, going back to these animals and how rank some of these bulls are. You got to know what you're doing and go through this process intentionally and really, know what you're getting into. But at the same time, not all men are created equal, and some men are created to be gladiators. And that's exactly what you find in a bull rider.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty intimate with the world of boxing. I come from that world partially, and that's the closest I could come. When those guys step in that ring, it's not a game. It's not a game. It's life.
Yep. Everybody's got a game plan until somebody punches them in the mouth.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mike Tyson.
How big is the difference between bronc and bull riding? Because Freckles did. But by the way, everybody, not only did he work the event, not only did he go out and ride bulls, he's like, and give me horses, and give me, like, he did all kinds. He was busy, man. That guy, he did a lot of shit.
Yeah, bronc riding, saddle bronc riding, bareback riding right now is growing, and rightfully so. They're two amazing aspects of the rodeo world and events in themselves, and the learning curve to learn how to ride a bareback horse, to learn how to ride a saddle bronc horse is fairly steep. You kind of have to be a little bit older in your years. They have these little mini broncs now. Actually, my 6 and 7 year old sons are going to get ready to start riding mini broncs, which is nice in the sense to be able to learn the process, learn the sport at a safer level, if you will. However, it's still awfully rough, and those horses are awfully big and strong and athletic in their own right. But bareback riding, saddle bronc riding, it's never been better in the sport, in my opinion, as far as the depth of athleticism. So you're looking at, the Keenan Hayeses, the Rocker Steiners in the bareback riding, and then in the saddle bronc riding in the Wright family as a whole, and all these other athletes. But it is phenomenal. The thing about horse riding, which is nice though, is that you find that rhythm and you learn the sport and you learn how to ride. You can really start to dress it up and make it look pretty, and it's a little bit more of an art in a sense, in that form, where bull riding is a little grittier in the sense of that bull can make a little bit sharper turns. They're turning back a little bit more. Some of the adversity you might have to go through in a bull ride might be slightly different, but they're both amazing aspects. And for one person to go, like you said, to not only do it in general, but to get on a bucking horse and then probably 10-15 minutes later get on a bull, that's a big time testament. That's where you've got specific awards in our sport just for people like that, right? In the all around race. And you've got Stetson Wright of today and the Ty Murray of the 90s, where coming into the NFR, just like Freckles Brown, you're getting on not only a bucking horse and a bucking bull, you're getting on the very best bucking horse and bull, and having to do that for 10 straight days. That's 20 head, or in Ty Murray's case, 30 head of the rankest animal athletes on the planet that you're having to get on in 10 days. And so that's why, people like Freckles Brown, Stetson Wright, Ty Murray, it doesn't get any better in my mind than those all around cowboys.
Yeah. Let's make sure we plug your stuff too, Cody. You were so great in helping us out with this. You brought that real experience. So how can folks find you, and how do they listen to your work when you're calling sports?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, like I said, I am just thrilled to get into the book and to read the ride and learn more about Freckles. But yeah, I'm a PRCA, bull ride, and also a bull riding announcer, and for the ABBI and stuff. So go up and down the road. But I also have a new podcast coming out, and it's going to be featured at the Virgin Hotel in Las Vegas during the NFR. So in any one of the platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you might listen to your podcast, check out The Woodshed with Cody Wood. It's fairly new, and looking forward to introducing more rodeo aspects and beyond, not just rodeo, but a lot of different things and aspects of life. So feel free to check that out. But Pete, Ron, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this today.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Let me wrap this up. Everybody go check that out. NFR is going to be, and he'll be at the Virgin Hotels. You can actually go watch live and see the Woodshed and Cody Wood. Not hard to find Cody. And if you struggle with it, go to Facebook. You can find him there, or Pete at breakitdownshow.com, and I'll connect you. Everybody, thank you for watching. Buy Ron's book, go to rodeo, and just get your mind blown by it. These incredible athletes, whether they're human or bulls or horses. I'm going to hang up here. Everybody else, I'll talk to you tomorrow, and you two, I'll say goodbye to you in a sec.